C-Log2 is the most powerful video profile Canon offers right now, but it's also the one that trips people up the most. Noisy shadows, bad exposure, or clips you have no idea how to grade. So in this video I will walk you through exactly what to do. From your camera settings to nailing exposure to getting clean, good-looking colors in your edit. No prior log footage experience required. Here we go. The first thing to change in your camera after setting up C-Log2 is to jump into the menu below View Assist or Screen depending on your camera and enable View Assist in Rec 709 mode. Because by default C-Log2 looks really flat and grey on your screen, and View Assist gives you a preview that's closer to the final look, so you can actually frame and judge your exposure properly. Then in the picture profile settings, ensure the color space is set to Cinema Gamut. It records a wider range of colors than BT709 or BT2020, and that gives you more flexibility once you get into color grading. Canon's newer cameras also give you proper exposure tools like false color, waveform and zebras. These are useful tools, and I personally prefer either using the waveform monitor or the zebras. False color is nice, but distracts me too much from the image when I'm on the go, and it's only really usable on the cinema line cameras as they make it easy to turn on and off. And that leads me to exposing C-Log2. There are two ways to do that. Either you chase the maximum dynamic range out of your sensor, or you expose so that the image already looks close to right after your LUT is applied later in the color grade. Depending on the circumstances, both are important to know about, so let me show you both. If dynamic range is your first priority, the classic approach is called exposing to the right. To do so, turn on your histogram or waveform monitor, keep brightening up the shot until the graph just starts hitting the right edge on the histogram or the top of the waveform monitor, then pull back a touch so you're sitting just below the clipping point, what means that all the detail in your highlights is preserved. That's the point where you capture the maximum dynamic range possible. Now, if you've got a strong light source in your frame, like the sun, a lamp or so, this rule goes out the window because those will always push the histogram to the right or waveform to the top, no matter what you do. In that case, mostly forget the histogram or waveform monitor and just judge the shot with your eyes. How big do you want the sun to be? Is the rest of the frame exposed well? That kind of stuff. So you have to ask yourself what's important in the shot and ensure that it's not too dark on the screen. And sometimes that actually means that you have to slightly change your camera angle because there are situations where it's just not possible to get it right. At least not without reflectors or diffusers, and let's be honest, oftentimes you just don't have them with you. So that is a situation where I would simply do that. I would simply ensure that the sun is not in the shot anymore. So now it looks good. My honest take would be that exposing to the right gives you the cleanest data to work with, the most dynamic range, but it is a bit harder to work with in post because you have to bring the exposure down, it adds a bit more time. That's why, unless I'm in an extreme situation, I prefer the second method. The second method is much simpler. Open up your zebra settings, dial them to somewhere around 55 to 60, and then expose brighter or darker until zebras appear on the bright parts of people's skin. When you see zebras showing up there, your exposure is dialed in. And because you're erring slightly on the brighter side when you set it to 60, your shadows stay cleaner and your color grading becomes way less of a headache. If the 60 isn't quite matching your skin tone, just nudge it up or down a bit. There's no perfect number here, just whatever looks right for you, but it's usually somewhere around that 55 to 60-ish area. Quick tip, if you're shooting something where there's no person in the frame, stick your hand in it, get zebras on the bright part of your skin by lifting the exposure up or down, and you're good. And I know what you likely want to lift as well, the revenue from your filmmaking and photography. Honestly, the hardest part of that isn't the craft, it's finding steady, paid work without constantly chasing clients and waiting for people to pay your invoices. If that's you, you might want to have a look at Wirestock. They connect photographers, videographers, 3D artists, illustrators and photo editors with a consistent source of paid projects. A lot of the work right now is freelance projects in the AI space, and they also have photo and video production projects on there too. The big thing is that they focus on ongoing projects, not one-off gigs where you disappear after the invoice is paid, and you can expect a steady stream of income projects to work on. The way it works is simple. You sign up, get a short test task, and once the team reviews your work, you get access to projects with clear requirements and deadlines. You pick whatever matches your skills, submit your work, and get paid directly through the platform via PayPal or Payoneer. No client outreach, no negotiating, no chasing invoices. The whole hunting for work part is taken off your plate. For people who want a more stable way to earn from their creative skills, it's a genuinely useful option. They've paid out over $15 million to their community, so there's a lot of opportunity for creative professionals here. I've set up a page for you guys, link is in the description, and check it out if this sounds like something you're interested in. When it gets super dark, like at night, it's usually best to use the exposure to the right technique we discussed earlier to ensure you get the least amount of noise in your shadows. It mustn't be totally overexposed, but it should look brighter than natural on your screen. And don't forget to ideally stick to your base ISOs in such situations and expose via low shutter speeds, aperture, and professional lights if possible. I always use my 35mm f1.4 VCM lens for these situations. That makes it quite easy to lift the exposure. Okay, let's talk about ISO in C-Log2. ISO with C-Log2 confuses a lot of people, so let me keep this simple. Your main base ISO is usually 800 for C-Log2 on Canon cameras. That's where the sensor performs best and where you get the full dynamic range. So whenever you can, shoot at 800, especially in anything high contrast. Also, to get the best results, stick to frame rates that oversample your footage. On the R5 Mark II, that's 30 frames per second or less in 4K, or 60 frames per second in 8K if you put it on a 4K timeline later. And on the C50, R6 Mark III, and potential future cameras with the same sensor, that's up to 60 frames per second in 4K. The C50 and R6 Mark III also have a second gain stage at ISO 6400 and the Canon R5 Mark II in ISO 4000. That's noticeably cleaner than the ISOs just below it, which is why it exists. It's a dedicated base for darker conditions. So ISO 6400 is great for low light, but not only that, it's also great in run and gun situations where you're combining it with ND filters. Say you're outside with a 3 to 7 stop variable ND filter on, sun's blasting, everything's fine. But then you walk indoors and suddenly it's way too dark. Instead of pulling the ND off or swapping it out, just flip up the second base ISO and keep rolling. Huge time saver. But again, if you're in a really tricky lighting scene where every step of dynamic range counts, step back to 800 and adjust your ND or change it, because that's where you will get the best performance. So your footage is easy to handle in the color grade, what we're coming to next. Alright, post-production time. Let's start with how you would do it in Final Cut Pro or Premiere before I come to DaVinci Resolve, because there is a bit different. I know you might be scared about grading log, but this part really isn't hard. It's mainly about pulling the exposure up or down a bit before you slap on your LUT or color managing your footage, and it's basically the same process in Premiere, Final Cut Pro, Resolve, whatever you're using. So here's a clip I exposed a bit on the brighter side to get started. If I just drop a LUT on it without adjusting, it clearly looks overexposed. The fix? Add a 3-way color corrector or color adjustment effect before the LUT and pull the exposure down until it looks natural. And that's important to remember. Make sure you're doing this before the LUT gets applied, not after, because once the LUT converts the image, you've already crushed your highlight data in that process if you overexposed the shot. Dragging the exposure down after the fact won't bring those details back. Now here's another clip where I nailed the skin tone exposure with Zebra. I apply the LUT and it pretty much just works. Maybe a tiny adjustment here and there and I'm done. Now I'm editing the video right now and this is the part where I wanted to show you where you find those LUT files. But I can't find them anymore. Like, I've been looking everywhere on the internet. It looks like Canon somehow took them down or changed the system or whatever. There are like some LUT files that have some predefined looks, but you want to have a neutral LUT file for color grading there.
I think Canon assumes now that everyone would just use color management or so in Resolve, which we'll come to later. But there are still workflows like in Final Cut where that doesn't really make sense, because the kind of color management or LUTs that Final Cut provides apply the LUT before you do your basic color grades or changes. And that's not really good to handle. Now, I still have the LUTs that Canon provided earlier, so I will just upload them to Google Drive and leave you the link there, so you can just use the same LUTs that I use here. Alternatively, you can look on Google. There are some free LUTs. Gerald Andan also has some very color accurate LUTs for them. And if you go for a more filmic look, then here Joel Famularo, he has those Phantom LUTs. Just look for them on Google and they will also work. They just cost a bit more money. Yeah, but these are your options now.
What also works really nice is to use a plugin called Cinematch, especially for HDR color grading in Final Cut Pro. I made a tutorial on my workflow with it recently. You will find a link in the description below to see how that works. It's pretty powerful. If you're editing in DaVinci Resolve, there's actually an even better approach. I prefer the color managed workflow, and even better, it's built into the free version of DaVinci Resolve, so you don't pay anything for it. Setting it up takes a few extra steps, so I made a dedicated video on it, linked below and at the end of this one. But essentially, just copy the settings you see here on the screen, both for general settings and project settings, and you're good to go. From there, you just have to tell Resolve that the input color space is CANON CLOG2/Cinema Gamut, and it converts everything to Rec 709 or chosen HDR color space for you automatically. You don't even need color space transforms, because Resolve handles that automatically in the color managed mode. From there, you just fine-tune exposure and grade like normal. No LUT required and no node setup for conversion. Once you've gone through the initial setup, every new project just works. And that's it. Two choices: either expose for skin tones and go straight to your color grade, or expose brighter and back it off with a color corrector before the conversion to Rec 709. And once you've got those two things down, C-Log2 stops feeling intimidating, and you're getting significantly more flexibility in your grade than with C-Log3 or even other picture profiles you probably shot before. That's a lucky one today. Sun just disappears. But what was perfect, because I actually needed a bit of soft light to actually show you the zebras, otherwise it's sometimes a bit complicated if the light is too harsh. It came exactly in the right moment, exactly when that shot was on the list. So I'm out for this video. Subscribe if it was helpful and check out my other tutorials. There are so many filmmaking tutorials on this channel. I see you there.